It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the movies of April 10th, 1992. A pretty good weekend overall, considering the list of movies that we have here. So, we got 5 of them to look at. Let's not waste any time. Let's just jump on into it. And we'll start off with the first movie that we have here, and that is Stephen King's Sleepwalkers. Interesting thing of note here, this is actually Stephen King's first movie that he's written, not based off of one of his existing works. This is an original property of his. And it's not especially a very good horror movie, but it's one hell of a so bad it's good type of movie. I mean, this movie is friggin' hilarious, man. I mean, this movie, that trailer, it sells as a typical horror movie, but when you really watch this movie and watch the insanity level and just stupid writing that goes into this, you're going to have the time of your life if you love so bad it's good movies, because this is the definition of a great so bad it's good movies, and classic crazy Stephen King. I mean, this is right up your alley if you love that kind of stuff, because man, the left turns that the sharp left turns this movie takes are amazing. They are so hilarious. The acting in here is so over the top. Just the world around in this world is so over the top and so hilariously crazy. Like, it's hard not to have a good time with this movie. You're not going to go into this movie expecting this deep, serious horror movie that's trying to take itself way too seriously, like something like Pet Sematary was. Even though the original Pet Sematary is a good movie, this is a movie that you go into, turn your brain off, and just have the time of your life with it, because the movie doesn't care about being original, about being smart or clever. It just wants to give you the thrill of a lifetime, and it definitely shows in this movie. I mean, this is a brilliantly handled movie. I love this movie so much. I'm so glad I was brought into this idea of this film a couple years ago when I watched the Nostalgia Critic review, and I had to watch it for myself. It's as insane as you would think it would be. It's a ton of fun. If you haven't seen this movie and you love a good, so bad it's good type of movie, this is it right here. Sleepwalkers. Can't recommend this one enough. Just good tons of fun all around. And now let's go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum with something for the families to go and see, and that is the animated Fern Gully: The Last Rainforest. So this was put out by 20th Century Fox. This was kind of one of their attempts to try to battle in with Disney at the time. Universal, of course, did that with An American Tail, Five It Goes West earlier, and we looked at a movie last week with Rockadoodle that Samuel Goldwyn was trying to compete with Disney, and neither one of these really had that big of a success factor. Fern Gully was considered a success, considering that it did open up in April of '92, and it made money at the box office. It didn't make a huge lot of money, but it was still considered a moderate success, especially later on in video sales. They even spawned a sequel that's really, it's your typical direct-to-video sequel, but I mean, this movie overall isn't that bad. I just watched it again because I got the Blu-ray version of it recently by Shout Factory. It is a pretty enjoyable movie. I think it is more enjoyable than a lot of people would give it credit for. It's got a good cast to it. Samantha Mathis is playing Krista, the lead angel, lead fairy in this. Tim Curry's the villain, which is usually a ton of fun. He has a good song in this as well. Christian Slater's in here, Jonathan Ward, Robin Williams, Douglas Seal. But obviously, this would be the next movie that Williams and Seal would be the voices in this same year. Aladdin proved to be a much more successful and a much better movie. But like I said before, as far as the movie itself goes, it's pretty good. I do think the animation still holds up to this day, and I will give it credit that the environmental message of the film isn't as preachy or as bad as some of these other movies of the time period were forcing the message on. This one didn't do it too bad, and the animation overall was pretty good. This is Bill Croyer. You probably haven't heard his name, but you've definitely seen his work before. He did stuff for Animalypics, Tron. He would later go on to do some work for The Green Mile, The Flintstones of Viva Rock Vegas, and Rugrats in Paris. And I believe this was his only directorial outing. It's also produced by Peter Feynman, who, of course, is known for Crocodile Dundee. And I think this was his last movie that he was behind in Hollywood before he eventually stopped making movies. But I'm not entirely sure on that. Don't quote me on that. But, yeah, overall, the film itself is a ton of fun. I remember watching this as a kid, and I remember enjoying it then. It still holds up to me to this very day. It's a movie that's not really all that great, but it is an enjoyable movie. It's a nice little nostalgic trip back. It was a nice nostalgic trip back when I saw it again recently, and it is a ton of fun. So if you want to see something with some nice animation, some great voice work, you should definitely check this movie out. Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to the next movie that we have here, and that is kind of another underrated kids film of the time period, and that is Disney's Newsies. So Newsies is directed by Kenny Ortega, who would later go on to become more known for his work with the High School Musical films. Overall, became one of the great Broadway directors of the time period, stage directors overall, because I think he also did the stuff from Michael Jackson's "This Is It," because I think his name was also attached to that. But another thing that's most notable about this movie is that this was Christian Bale's first major leading starring role. I mean, he got top billing over Robert Duvall. I mean, that says something for a guy like him who 4 years ago was just in Empire of the Sun, which kind of launched his career. And this was another film that's one of those that wasn't a big hit back at the time. It was actually a big failure at the box office. On a $15 million budget, it only brought back about $3 million in total box office. But it did go on to have this cult following on video and on DVD, and it actually did become a successful musical on Broadway again. And when you watch this movie again, you can kind of see why. This is actually a pretty fun movie. I mean, the cast overall is great. You got Bale, you got Duvall, you also have Bill Pullman in here. Anne Margaret's also in this. Gabriel Damon from The Land Before Time, Max Casella, Mark Lawrence, who would later go on to direct the Miss Congeniality movies. It's a great cast overall. You've got great music by Alan Menken. You also have Jack Feldman, who wrote some really great songs for Oliver and Company and The Lion King 2. And it looks visually gorgeous. I mean, this is a movie that's over 30 years old, and it still looks visually stunning. Just the set designs alone are really impressive to look at. And, yeah, it's just a really fun movie overall. I'm glad it did find a following over the years, because it's one of Disney's most underrated films, in my opinion. It's a movie that really has aged well over time, and a lot of the stuff that they're talking about in this movie kind of holds up in the modern day setting, really, when you really think about it. But yeah, it's a really fun movie. It's a really good film. Some great music, great visual scenery, great cast overall. It's a fantastic film. Definitely check this movie out if you can. Newsies, really a great film. With that said, let's go ahead and move on to the next movie here, and that is Robert Altman's The Player. Yeah, this is probably the best new movie that came out this weekend. I would say best overall, but the next movie we're going to be talking about is one of my favorite movies of all time, but we'll get to that one when we get to that one. But yeah, of all the new releases, this is really the best new one that came out this weekend. This was a really great film, and really, for Robert Altman, it's one of his best modern-day films, because this was kind of the movie that kind of relaunched his career, as he had kind of a number of films that didn't make a ton of money in the 70s and 80s, and he kind of fell out of the system a little bit. But this was the first movie he did in a long time where he really rejuvenated his career, and you could definitely see why. This is a wonderfully made movie. Tim Robbins is great in this film. You also have a ton of great people in this cast. Greta Scacchi's in here, Fred Ward, Whoopi Goldberg, Peter Gallagher, Brian James, Cynthia Stevenson, Vincent D'Onofrio, Dean Stockwell, Richard E. Grant, Sidney Pollack, Lyle Lovett, Gina Gershon. A lot of celebrity cameos in here. Jeremy Piven, Scott Glenn, Bruce Willis, Julie Roberts. You saw in the trailer that Cher's in this. Burt Reynolds. They got a ton of celebrities to be in this movie, and it's just a great, great film overall. I mean, right from the beginning, the opening scene of the movie just takes your breath away, because it's a long scene. It's almost 8 minutes with no edits whatsoever, and it's not. And they had to do this 15 times to get this right, and everything had to be done in that one singular shot. And according to what I found on Wikipedia, it actually was the 10th take that's used in the final edit. And I hate to be the editor that had to look at all these different takes and find the best one out of all these different versions that they did. I mean, it's a real tough task to do, and it pays off because it's a really good, effective scene. The movie is just a ton of fun. The movie is just very well written. It's creatively brilliantly written. Some great scenery, a great cast overall, a great mystery overall. It's a wonderfully made film. It's a fantastic film that works on so many levels. It's one of my favorite movies that came out that year. Can't recommend this movie enough. The Player. If you haven't seen it, please go and check it out. So with that said, on to the last movie, and that is the re-release of what is one of my favorite movies of all time, and that is, of course, Casablanca. If you've been following my stuff for the last couple of years, you would know that this is in my top 5 favorite movies of all time. This is actually my 4th favorite film of all time. And on screen, it definitely shows you why. Casablanca is one of those happy little accidents that comes around where everything just comes together, and it's an almost perfect love story. You've got 2 great leads here, Humphrey Bogart, Ingmar Bergman. They work really well off each other, and you can definitely tell that these were 2 lovers at one point, these characters that they play. And after all these years of being apart, they still have these feelings for each other, whether they want to see it or not. The cast overall is great here. I mean, this is a phenomenal cast. The good guys are respectively set up. The bad guys are respectively set up. Everybody just works as well as they should with these roles that they have here. And you have great cinematography, too, shot in black and white, creating a very unique film noir style that a lot of the movies of the time period had back then. The music is top-notch. There's nothing more you can say about As Time Goes By, which is one of the great scenes in film history. It's perfectly constructed, presented. Definitely one of the great films in scenes in film history. The script overall is just great. It just has a ton of great moments in movie history. And it's led to a lot of great parodies in film history, too. I mean, the 3 biggest ones I always go back to is the one from The Critic, the 30-Second Bunnies version, and of course the Looney Tunes version that they did in the 90s, Carrot Blanca, which was actually my first exposure to Casablanca. That was the first thing I ever saw that had the name Casablanca to it, and that was the parody version of it. And you know what? For trimming that whole movie down to 7 minutes, they did a pretty good job with it. It's actually a really funny short that they did. If you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. I mean, it's something that's also been used in many modern films, too. Like, one of the biggest surprises was when I saw the movie Out Cold for the first time, and I didn't realize it, but it's a raunchy comedic version of Out Cold, and even more surprising, it's actually a pretty good movie. I'm not going to say it's a classic or on the same level as this movie, but it does a very good job making these references to Casablanca, but not just doing a straight-up remake of it, which I was also shocked to find out that Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez were actually going to do a remake of Casablanca when they were together, but then Geely happened, and then that never happened, although they are back together again at the time of this posting, so they wouldn't do it, would they? You never know, especially now with Warner Brothers and how they're being run right now. You never know that if someone at the studio is like, that's actually a pretty good idea. Do not take that as an idea from me. Just please do not remake Casablanca, for God's sake. But yeah, overall, Casablanca is just a great love story. Combines all the great elements of a movie, great characters, great music, great romance, comedy, drama, beautiful cinematography. It's just a movie experience that every time you go back to it, it just gets better and better every time. It's not hard to believe that this is one of the greatest films ever made, and it definitely shows. Casablanca, need I say more about it? So on that note, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. Next time we meet, we look at the movies of April 17th. 5 movies again to look at. Not quite as many good movies in this slate here. We have John Goodman playing Babe Ruth in The Babe. We got Lawrence Fishburne in Deep Cover. We also have City of Joy, Brain Donors with John Turturro, and then Brooke Shields and Brenda Starr. So you might be surprised on some of these movies, but there's not going to be as many good ones as there was this week. So with that said, thank you guys for watching, and as always, if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you for watching. I'll see you next time, and until then, take care.